Hi everyone, welcome to Good Knits by SK. I'm Sherry, and today I'm going to take you through my winter knitting plans. So in the fall, that was the first time that I had ever done an actual knitting plans video, and also just the first time that I had planned kind of my knits out per season in general. And I really enjoyed the process because I think the project manager in me really likes to bring structure to chaos. So the idea of like putting things into a clear order, deciding what the priorities were, being able to tick off boxes was something that I really enjoyed. But if I reflect back on my fall knitting plans and kind of what I put into that last video, I think the biggest challenge was I planned way too much. So there was just a lot of projects in there that I wasn't going to get to, and I didn't. But what I did notice is the projects that I said I absolutely needed to finish, or that I needed to work on, like my blouse number 2, my cami number 9, the Salty Day sweater, and the Storm Sweater Junior. Those were the projects that I really stuck to. And so I think like having this clear idea of what I really wanted in my wardrobe, what was important to me, what I wanted to prioritize, really helped me make sure that I did that in a way that made sense. But then I kind of threw in all these other ideas that I didn't have yarn or plans for, and in the end they basically all dropped off. So with that in mind, going into winter knitting, I am really going to focus on the projects that I'm pretty confident I am going to do, that I really feel like have a place in my wardrobe and a clear purpose. And I also want to focus on using yarn already in my stash. So I have said in the past, I typically don't buy yarn unless I have a clear project for it, which was true even last season, but I do think I went a bit overboard in buying yarn with all these ideas of what I wanted to cast on, and then in the end I wasn't really ready to cast those projects on. So I just have a lot of yarn sitting there now that I really want to make use of, and so it's not to say I'm not going to buy any new yarn in the next season, but I am really going to try to just use what I have because I'm really happy with the yarn that I have. I think I have projects in mind for all of it, and I'd really like to work it down so that in the spring I can kind of start fresh with new ideas in mind. Another learning I had from my fall knitting is I planned in far too much texture. So the Salty Day sweater, the blouse number 2, and the Storm Sweater Junior were all very textured pieces. They weren't easy to just memorize and follow, so you really had to be looking at a pattern. And I made the mistake of casting on all 3 of those projects at exactly the same time. And in the end, I finished my Storm Sweater Junior because I had a very tight deadline for that. I had to have it ready for Canada when I went in November. But the other 2 have sort of been hanging out and being worked on here and there. But like blouse number 2, I was really excited about to start. I got it cast on, I got it joined in the round, and then the second I started the other 2 projects, that just got thrown aside because I was like, well, we're going into winter. I don't know how much I'm really gonna wear this, so I can pick it up later. And I hate just having projects sitting around. But I could not focus, especially with having quite a stressful job the last few months. There was no way that I could work on that much texture. And then in the end, you end up having these projects that you would like to pick up and do, but you don't have the mental capacity for it. So you kind of get stuck and frozen and don't end up working on anything, or you go back to maybe like a hat. So I don't want to make that mistake again. It's not to say I only want to work on stockinette projects, but I do think for me, what I'd like to focus on is having only one textured pattern at a time, whether that's an accessory or a garment, and then the rest being simpler, easier to follow, maybe not entirely stockinette, but definitely things that I can just mindlessly work on because I think that's where my head's at. It's probably going to be that way for the next few months. And so I want to set myself up for success and really have projects that I know I'm going to work on and be able to complete, because as much as I stuck to a lot of my fall knitting, I haven't really finished a lot. So I ended up prioritizing all the gift knits I had. I really powered through a lot of Oslo hats, the baby sweater, and a scarf for my friend, but I didn't really finish much for myself. So I don't want to make that mistake again. I would like this now to be the season of a bit more selfish knitting, and therefore I'm going to really prioritize finishing off what I have and casting on new things for myself that I feel I can accomplish. So with all of that in mind, I'm gonna keep this video super simple. I basically just have sweaters and accessories. So it's not gonna be super long. I think there maybe are a few new patterns in here. I've also talked about quite a lot of them in my podcasts, but yeah, let's just go through, starting with the sweaters. So the first sweater that I wanna talk about is the Monday sweater from PetiteKnit. So I really decided that I wanted to have a more basic raglan sweater in my wardrobe. I did a poll on Instagram a few months ago just to see what patterns people were really drawn to, what have they made multiples of, kind of what were their favorite basics. And quite a lot of people came back with the Monday sweater, which was already really high on my list of considerations. So that just kind of solidified for me. I think this will be a good fitting pattern. I really like how clear PetiteKnit patterns are, and therefore I'm going to cast this on. So the Monday sweater is a top-down construction made with fingering and mohair held double, or you can do a single strand of DK, and it's knit on 4mm needles. Last summer, I met with a stylist here in Amsterdam from Fashion and Repeat, and we ended up doing a color analysis as part of that appointment. And I've mentioned before, what came out of that is I am a true autumn profile. So really autumnal colors, deep, rich greens, oranges, coppers, those colors work best on me, not typically black or white. And I've noticed in my knitting, I tend to really stick to sweaters like this, which are knit in more basic colors like browns. I also do mix in a little bit of like dusty violet purple, but yeah, other than maybe green, I tend to stick to browns and grays. So I really want to try to push myself out of that comfort zone and really pick out more of the colors from that true autumn profile. And so I realized rather than just knitting the Monday sweater in a very basic brown or gray or even cream, let's go with a rich, vibrant autumn color from my palette. So I decided to go with a kind of rusty orange copper color. So I've already bought the yarn for this, which is the Jelvolds Uldspinderi Dans Pasuld 82 in this beautiful copper color. So it's a bit heathered. And after a lot of consideration and debating and holding this color up to different mohairs on the screen, I finally landed on pairing it with the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in claret. And I think these two match nearly perfect. So I ended up finally doing the swatch for this weekend, and this is the final color combo. And I really love the way that it's turned out. So I think for the most part, I am ready to cast this on, except for the fact that my 4mm needles are currently being used for another project. So I think I'm gonna wrap that up first. It's a hat for my husband, and then cast this on so I can use my Chowgoos, which are the needles that I'm happier using. The only thing with this sweater is the yarn that I picked as the fingering is definitely more rustic and toothy than I was expecting. When you're working with it, it really has a bit of a bite to it, which isn't my favorite, but I've also never worked with this kind of yarn. I really want to give it a chance, and I do find with blocking, it softened up a little bit, not a ton. So I'm gonna give it a go. And then if I don't like it, I'll just never knit with this kind of yarn again. But I also think maybe I just need to wear like a base layer to this type of sweater. Usually I don't wear undershirts with my sweaters, but with a yarn like this, maybe that will be the direction that I need to head. So I think this will be my first official cast on of the winter. I was going to see if I could maybe finish a couple other projects before casting it on, but having swatched now, I'm just ready to get it on my needles. So I think I'm just gonna go ahead and do that the second this hat is done. The second sweater on my list is the soft loop sweater by Other Loops. So this is a top-down construction with a bit of a turtleneck and a subtle stripe pattern, which is made up of knits and purls. And one of the main reasons that I wanted to make this is you've seen me talk in the past about my sweater number 8 from My Favorite Things Knitwear. I really love the overall look and style of that sweater, and I've been looking to make kind of the next iteration of that without making the same pattern. And I think this really fits the bill. It's got that boxy fit, it's drapey, and I really like the fact that it has an interesting texture to it without also being a complicated texture. There's no cables or anything, which is also something I really enjoyed about the storm sweater pattern, is when you're just using knits and purls, you feel like you have this really impressive garment at the end, but it's not actually that difficult to make. The only thing with this pattern is there are kind of two main downsides. One, it's not really size inclusive. There's only 3 sizes, 1 to 3. And even though it does say it needs 25 or recommends 25 to 40 centimeters of positive ease, yeah, it only goes up to a bust measurement of, what did it say? I think 144 centimeters. So that's not a lot. And I'm not sure why the designer chose to only make 3 sizes, because looking at her other patterns, they typically at least go from an extra small to a double or triple XL. The other downside to this pattern is it does require at least 2 yarns, but typically 3 if you're just using Mohair. So I kind of dove into this pattern head first. I fell in love with it, decided I wanted to make it. There was a sale at Gartopia, and I ended up buying the Gapard Wild and Soft in coffee cream, which is the main yarn that it calls for in all cases. So really happy with this yarn. I like the quality. And then I decided I would wait and get it and then decide how I was going to pair it. So originally I was going to pair it with the Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in this brown color, color number 5. Because I thought, hey, you know, they're kind of similar, they'll work well together. And with the Brushed Alpaca Silk, it's slightly thicker than a Mohair, so then you can get away with just pairing with 1 strand, which I felt like would bring the cost down, because for some reason, just with this sweater, I really like the look of it, but it's also not something I want to invest heavily in for yarn, so I'd like to keep this under 100 euros if I can. I'm just not sure if that's realistic at this point. So I swatched for this, and I'm just finding it's too dark. This ended up being very similar in color to the sweater number 8 that I already have. I don't really want to make a similar sweater in the same color. Also, my gauge was off on this. I believe I had too many stitches on the recommended needles, which was 4.5 millimeter. So I would need to go down in needle size to make this one work. But before I swatch again, I wanted to see what would happen if I paired with a lighter yarn. So I don't have the swatch of this anymore because it was very mini, but I did swatch with this Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in Mushroom Rose, which I used on my Cumulus blouse in the past. And I really liked how it paired with this coffee cream color. So I know that I want to go lighter. I'm just trying to decide now, do I want to stick with the Brushed Alpaca Silk and go light beige? I'm just not really loving the way this Brushed Alpaca Silk, I don't know if you can really see, there's like a lot of kind of really hairy stuff coming out of this. It's not my favorite. So I think I'm gonna swatch again and see if I just hold it single, is it too airy? Can I make it work? Because then I'll just buy this color or a similar color as a single strand to hold. Or do I need to buy 2 strands of mohair, in which case this is going to become a very expensive sweater. I think it was going to be, I want to say 12 balls of mohair. So then we're definitely over 100 euros for the whole sweater. So stay tuned on that. I haven't quite decided what I'm gonna do. I think that will be my second cast on after the Monday sweater is done, and we'll go from there. So I will swatch for this again just to see what I need to do with the mohair, and then I'll make decisions. I do still really want the sweater. I just need to decide on the cost. But if I'm not buying other yarn for the season, then maybe that's okay. Then sweater number 3 is the Gallant sweater by Caidree. So this actually wasn't originally on my knitting plans. I've always had this project in the queue, and sorry, it's the Gallant sweater mohair version. So I've always had this sweater in my favorites, but never really had this strong call to cast it on. It's a top-down raglan construction with a mock neck, with a cropped kind of boxy fit. So very similar again to the sweater number 8, but a bit of a tighter feel and a bit more cropped in the body. Now it's suggested, obviously as the name says, with mohair, to make it with 2 strands of mohair held together. The reason I am not going to do that is because when I was in Canada, I went to Statement Junkie in Sherwood Park, and I ended up on a whim just buying this wool folk yarn, which is, I'm gonna say the name wrong, Far, F-A-R with a little accent on top. It is a chainette worsted weight yarn, and I bought 6 balls, which I didn't really add up the yardage in my head because this is only 779 meters worth of yarn. And I was thinking, okay, I probably can easily get this in Europe now that I'm back. And when I did some research, turns out I can't. So I need to make it work with the yarn that I have. So I did some research on Ravelry, and I looked, and there's very few patterns that for a size small sweater only need 6 balls of this. So that is how I landed on the Gallant sweater, because it was already something I was interested in making. But also, I really wanted something that is similar to an Aritzia sweater that I have. Let me get it. So in addition to just the yarn selection that I had made and only having 6 balls, which is sort of forcing me to pick a very specific pattern, the other reason that I want to make the Gallant is because it's very similar to a sweater that I bought at Aritzia a couple years ago. So this is the neckline, and then it just has ribbing and that at the bottom. So this is the trim, like the rib on the cuffs and body is obviously different than the Gallant, but I really like the way that this sweater fits. And it's probably the most worn commercial bought sweater that I have in my wardrobe. Originally, I was always planning to make the Sarin sweater, also by Caidree, which calls for a cashmere yarn, which is very similar to the Aritzia one. And then I was just gonna modify the kind of final finishing to add in that rib. But this yarn doesn't work for that, and also I wouldn't have enough of it. So I decided a good in-between is the Gallant sweater because it kind of has that overall feel, and I can make this yarn work because it's beautiful. It's probably one of the pricier yarns I've ever bought, and I would like to make something that I really feel like I'll get wear out of. And I was always planning to make the Sarin sweater in this beautiful aubergine color anyway. So I think this works well. It's a nice balance. I already wound up the yarn for this. I haven't swatched. I definitely need to make sure when I do swatch that I can rip it apart because the pattern for a size small calls for 735 meters. So I'm gonna be cutting it really, really close on the yardage or the meterage. So I need to be careful also to not tangle any of this yarn, otherwise I'm not going to be able to finish the sweater. So the final 2 sweaters in my winter knitting plans are projects that are already on my needles that I am just committed to finishing. So the first one is blouse number 2 from my Favorite Things Knitwear, which I briefly talked about earlier. So this is a textured blouse. I'm making it in Drops Cotton Merino in navy. And like I said, I cast this on as part of my fall knitting. It was probably one of the first projects that I started. And then with all the other texture, I put it aside. So since I really don't have any other textured sweaters in my plans other than the soft loops, and I don't think that's gonna be that complicated, I will pick back up the blouse number 2 because I'd like to finish it closer to the end of winter because I think it'll be a nice transition piece into spring. So that one I would like to finish. And then the final one I want to finish because I am committed to doing it is cardigan number 4 from my Favorite Things Knitwear as well. I showed this in, I think, 2 podcasts ago. It's been on my needles for over a year. It was one of those projects where I was just like really struggling with making it. It was really just such a fiddly, annoying knit where you have to do the button band at the same time as the body. It's an all over fisherman's rib or half fisherman's rib. And I was just struggling. But about a month ago, I finished one of the sleeves. So now I just have one sleeve left and then the buttons and I am done. So I'm so close. It's a good winter piece. I feel like I just need to commit, put it on the list so I can take it off and hopefully then I will finish it. So that is the final sweater that I just want to get done and I'm not going to commit to anything else. So that is 5 tops that I'm going to make hopefully this winter. And then the only other things that are kind of percolating in my mind are I saw Amy from Knee Knits talk about her zipper sweater from PetiteKnit. Of course, this has come up a lot in many podcasters. It's also all over Instagram all the time. People really love this pattern. I've never had a strong pull to make it. But seeing hers in that like dark charcoal gray, it had a little bit of heathering to it. I really like the overall like oversized fit that hers had. Suddenly I can't get it out of my head. So I am debating if I want to make that or if maybe I want to consider something more like the Lanark half zip, which is from Rebecca Clow or the Caidree. And another one on my list that I've had saved for a while is the, what's it called? Coastal Zip Up from Winter's Weather's Knits. But maybe a full zip project where you have to also do a lot of purling is just not something I'm super interested in. So I think maybe between the Lanark and the half zipper, if I still feel like making this, I'm gonna say like by the end of January, then I'll go ahead and buy the yarn for it. If I've kind of forgotten about it, then we're not gonna bother because clearly I don't need it that bad and I probably won't wear it a ton in the spring and summer. So then we'll wait and see if it's a project that I wanna do next year. So that's all the tops. Then going into accessories. So I've made a ton of accessories in the last few months, but none for myself because all of them are gift knits. So this season, I would really like to focus on making a few things for me because all my hats that I have are at least a year or 2 old. They're also not really in colors that go with my current winter jacket, which is camel color. So I really want something that's a little bit more dressy and a bit more stylish. And in Amsterdam, it never gets super cold. So all the scarves I have right now are quite big, they're very heavy, and they don't really work well in our climate. So I want to consider making, I don't want to make a whole shawl because I don't think I have the commitment to make that. Those are really big projects that take quite a while. So I think I just want to commit to a cowl. So let's start there. So I think I'm going to make the Cargill Cowl from Rebecca Clow or the Caidree. And this is made using her dip stitch pattern, which she also had in the Cargill Sweater, which I think came first, and then she decided to also do that in a cowl. It's made with DK weight or fingering held with mohair and on 4mm needles. I bought this pattern last November because she was doing a promo where the month that she released it, she was going to match up to $600 to donate to the Fistula Foundation. So I really wanted to support that. So I bought it, really had intentions of making it, but didn't have any yarn handy for it. So I put it aside and decided to wait. And then I just kind of forgot about it. And the only reason it actually came to mind is because I was using my new Swift on the weekend and was winding up my Olivia and Oliver Fibers merino fingering in Withered Rose, which is a beautiful yarn. And originally I was planning to make a September hat from PetiteKnit in this, but I have so much and it definitely won't all be used in a hat. So I decided maybe it would make more sense to make some sort of scarf or cowl. And I remembered I had this pattern, so I checked to see if I had enough yardage, and I do. And I also happen to have, I think 3 balls of this Drops Kid Silk in colorway 40 from, I think, sweater number 1 that I made a couple years ago. So they don't necessarily go perfect together. I'll swatch them up. Worst case, I'll just buy some Drops Kid Silk in a darker color because I do have another ball of a slightly darker rosy pink. I can't even remember what I used it for, but since that's such an inexpensive mohair, I don't mind investing a little bit more in a couple balls of the drops. So I think this will be a Christmas cast on for me, something I can work on over the holidays. It's still a little bit challenging, but small enough that I feel like I can accomplish it in a short period of time. And I think it should use the majority of this Olivia and Oliver Fibers yarn. So that's great. I feel like that's a good purpose. And it also gives me a cowl that will go well with my winter jacket. Then the next project, so I've been making a lot of Oslo hats, and I probably will still make a couple more because I have yarn, but I think everybody's been making Oslos, everybody's been talking about them. I'm not even gonna mention like a ton of detail on making more here. So what I want to focus on is I think I'm gonna make the, I'm gonna say it wrong, Musselburgh hat from Ysolda Teague. I keep seeing this popping up lately. I already had it in my favorites, and I really like this idea of a double folded hat that's done in stockinette, so it should be a nice mindless knit. And also the construction is really interesting. So you start from the crown and then you work your way out, then it's stockinette, you work your way down, you do decreases at the end, and then you're able to fold your hat so it's reversible. So you could do 2 colors or 1 color all the same, depending on how you want it to look. So I really like the idea of trying a new hat pattern, but something that's simple like the Oslo. So I have a bunch of random skeins just sitting in my stash that are perfect for hats. I bought them with the intention of making hats, but no specific patterns in mind. So I think the first consideration is the Sadness Garn Sunday in color 3161, which is this almond color. I think I did buy this with the intent of making an Oslo hat at one point. And I got a nice surprise today. I ended up finding an extra ball of the Olivia and Oliver Fibers Luau. Along, I think this is probably at least another 49 grams, and I already had 49 grams here, which basically means I have a whole skein of Luau, even after making a cumulus blouse, a pair of socks, an Oslo hat. I still have more, so clearly I overbought when I bought a sweater's quantity. And I love the way my Oslo hat turned out for my sister-in-law. So maybe this, if I have enough, will turn into a Musselburgh hat. Or I was thinking maybe I could do a reversible version where the brim, like one side ends up being the neon yellow, one side the brown. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Maybe that's a bit too bold for me, but I also have almost a whole skein of this Cascade Heritage in highlighter yellow, which I bought for my friend's Oslo. So definitely Musselburgh hat is something that I am going to cast on, and then see how I like that pattern, and maybe that becomes my replacement for the Oslo. It just does take a bit more yarn. Then the next one that I've talked about before is the penny gloves from PetiteKnit. So also as part of the Garntopia sale about a month ago, I ended up buying this Filcolana Alva in color 112. And I bought it with the intent of making a pair of penny gloves. I have 2 skeins or 2 balls, so I think I'm gonna cast this on maybe also over the holidays, because I'd really like a pair of fingerless gloves because I think they work well in Amsterdam in the winter. It doesn't tend to get really, really cold here, but with being on the bike or walking a lot of places, I think fingerless gloves will work really well. Maybe even put over my leather gloves, which don't tend to be super warm. So maybe the 2 paired together will add a little bit more warmth. But I'm really excited to work on these. Hopefully that will be a quick knit. And I've had that in my plans for a while and just never actually moved forward with it. And then the final project for winter in the accessories is a pair of socks. So in fall, I ended up casting on the Sunday socks for myself with some leftover Peruvian Highland wool from Filcolana. I haven't really loved working on those. I am just trying to finish my second sock finally, because it's not that it's a long knit, but I really dislike working on this 2x2 rib in magic loop. So my husband saw me making those. He really wanted a pair for himself. So I ended up buying this Sodness Garn Sunday in color 6553, which I think is just deep blue or something, with the intent of making him Sunday socks. That's what he really wanted. But I don't really want to make the Sunday socks again. So I was looking at DK weight patterns, and I think somebody on a previous episode had actually suggested this pattern to me, but it's the Whisky Neat Socks by Maxim, and I believe he's from Montreal. So I think I really like the overall look of those. It's not really ribbing, but it still has some visual interest and texture. So I think I'm gonna try to make his pair in that. He's also a huge fan of Whisky, so I feel like the name is just meant to be. And if I like making that pattern for him, then I will maybe make a second pair for me in the other colorway that I have, which is 9071. I bought this at the same time, also with the intent of making Sunday socks, before I realized I don't want to make them. But I don't really have any other use for this yarn because it's super wash. I only have 2 balls of each. Yeah, and I don't love working with super wash yarn, I've realized. So they will become socks, some sort of DK weight pattern socks, and we will see. So that brings me to the end of the list. I feel like I tried to be shorter in the overall pieces that I'm going to make, or less on my list, but somehow saying it out loud, it doesn't feel like I have less. But also I think there's quite a lot of accessories in here that probably won't take me that much time. It's just a matter of sitting down and getting them done. If you're interested in seeing my progress on my winter knitting plans, please go ahead, click and subscribe. It means a lot to me, and I will definitely be talking about all these things in upcoming podcast episodes, which I do about every 3 to 4 weeks. In the meantime, I am wishing you happy holidays. I hope you get lots of time for knitting and relaxing, and I will see you in 2024.